We all know that the character of our continent, smallness of national economies, smallness of investment capacity, industrial capacity, shallowness of manufacturing capacity, 42 currencies, trade patterns that take our economies somewhere else in another part of the world. This is the fundamental character of our economy for the last 65 years. Lack of global competitiveness. And so in the wisdom of the heads of states, they said, we must tackle this issue of fragmentation of Africa's market. And we must tackle this issue decisively, politically, economically, legally. 1.3 billion Africans, combined GDP of 3.4 trillion United States dollars, which is projected by the year 2035, which is projected to reach close to 7 trillion United States dollars. This is the capacity of our continent. But we are not going to achieve, in my view, in my humble opinion, we are not going to achieve that capacity if we remain in smallness of national economies, if we continue to say, I am this country, I am that country, I am that country, we are not going to be globally competitive. We must accelerate implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area so that these projections, the World Bank says by the year 2035, if we as Africans implement the African Continental Free Trade Area, the World Bank says we have an opportunity to lift 100 million Africans, 100 million Africans out of extreme and abject poverty and moderate poverty. We have an opportunity to increase intra-Africa trade by up to 81%, to increase and to contribute to Africa's combined GDP up to $450 billion by the year 2035. And what is particularly encouraging for me about this projection of the World Bank is that they say the most immediate beneficiaries of the African Continental Free Trade Area will be small, medium enterprises that are led by women, closing the gender salary gap by up to 12% by the year 2035. So we have an extraordinary opportunity. Yes, we are 65 years late, but we have an extraordinary opportunity as Africans to fundamentally restructure the economy of our continent, to establish regional value chains so that we get rubber processed in Liberia to make tires, we get copper processed in Zambia, in Ethiopia, leather processed, in the DRC, that we become the next frontier for the global economy. I was told, where I said this a few weeks ago, they told me, young men, you are naive. They said, the men said to me, young men, I admire your youthful naivety about Africa. Africa has no capacity to do anything. Africa will not do anything. But the proposition I want to advance to you today, honorable members, is that 20, 30, 40 years from now, is there a reason why our continent cannot be globally competitive? Is there a reason why we cannot, as Africans, be as globally competitive as India, China, any other part of the world? I believe we can. The world is transitioning. By way of example, the world is transitioning from combustible engines to electric vehicles? Where are the lithium batteries that are going to power that transition? They're in Zambia, Zimbabwe, DRC. We have the capability, but in my humble opinion, what has evaded us since May 1963 in Addis Ababa, what has evaded us is the lack of economic integration of our continent. We have achieved the political objective of the founding mothers and fathers of the Organization of African Unity. We achieved it. With the defeat of apartheid in this country where I was born, we achieved it. But we have not achieved economic integration. It continues to evade us as Africans. So I believe you and I have a historic mission, standing on the shoulders of our founding mothers and fathers of the Organization of African Unity, to continue and to finish the job that they started. The economic emancipation and integration of our continent. So, the African Continental Free Trade Area is not a trade agreement for people like me, bureaucrats. It is actually Africa's last opportunity. I do not believe we will have, as Africans, another opportunity. Again, this is it. My wife says, you don't sleep at night. Yes, I don't sleep at night because of the heavy responsibility. The heavy responsibility that you and I have to make sure that our continent succeeds, to stop the death of millions and millions of young Africans buried deep in the oceans of the Mediterranean, looking for opportunities abroad. This is what the African Continental Free Trade Area is about. If you look at Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, this is one of the flagship projects. So we have a continental free trade area that encompasses the broad scope of Africa's economy. Digital trade, competition policy, investment protection, intellectual property rights, establishing a single point for intellectual property rights in Africa. Why is it that your companies must go to Geneva to protect their intellectual property rights? What do you expect a small medium enterprise to do to protect her intellectual property rights? Must she go to Geneva? So I can put it in technical terms. I can put it in trade speak. But fundamentally, it is about Africa's economic interests, because thousands and thousands of our companies are protecting their intellectual property rights in Geneva when we are here on the continent. Why do we not have a single point of protecting our SMEs? Why do we continue to go down the path that the colonialists established, which is to say, Aripo or Wapi, you go there, French-speaking, English-speaking. Why do we do that as Africans? Why do we say a particular company must go and protect themselves in another part of the world? So it is not just about trade law. What we are tasked with is a historic mission to fundamentally restructure the economy of our continent. I want to suggest to you this. There's not a single country in Africa, not a single country in Africa that can be singularly globally competitive. It does not exist. Not South Africa, not Nigeria, not Morocco, not Kenya. None of us can ever be globally competitive, singularly, because the market is too small. We need one another. We need one another as Africans, as African economies, to integrate, to make sure that there's transit of goods, systems harmonization of customs, trade facilitation, movement of persons from this country to the other to power the global economy that we're in today. But they told me I am a youthful, naive young man when I say these things. But I believe in the capacity of our continent. I may be long gone, but one day, this continent will be globally competitive. And it starts with the African Continental Free Trade Area, so that that projection of the World Bank, 7 trillion United States dollars by the year 2035, can become a reality. We have, as Africans, a very unique opportunity by the turn of the century. Consider this. By the turn of this century, 1 in 4 people in the world will be African. The largest working force in the world will be here. The largest working force in the world by the turn of this century will be in Africa. What is it that we, as Africans, are going to do to shape that particular projection, to shape it in a way that we determine the direction of the global economy? We fundamentally restructure the architecture of the global economy. I think we can do it. I think we can do it. But we're not going to do it as South Africa, as Malawi, as Zambia, as individual countries. We can only do it when we follow the path in the Abuja Treaty, in the Lagos Plan of Action, May 1963. And we have taken concrete steps to make that particular objective a reality. For example, in May 1963, our founding mothers and fathers said we must have a single point of payment in Africa. Today, working with Afrexim Bank, we have developed the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. 42 currencies in Africa. $5 billion worth of $5 billion, the cost of currency convertibility, the cost of trade. We have developed the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System to enable trade in local currency, so that if you are in Ghana, as I live, you can trade with somebody in Ghanaian cedi, with somebody in Kenya. They receive the Kenyan shilling. There's no intermediary. Oh, astounding. The CEO of a regional bank tells me, I have a branch in Gisenyi, in Rwanda. I have another branch 10 kilometers down the road in Goma, in the DRC. $65 million worth of transactions per month. But when I want to transfer funds from Gisenyi to Goma, I have to use a correspondent bank in New York. 4 days, $65 million is sitting somewhere else. We transact as Africans, 2019, we transacted on SWIFT $20.5 billion worth of transactions. Africa. We're using an alternative platform. So we've introduced, with the vision of my senior brother, Professor Orama, my other senior brother, Dr. Adeshina, we are introducing tools practical tools to enable trade to happen. Infrastructure deficit, we all know, over $100 billion. If you go, as I have, to any border on the continent, border crossing, you will see trucks lined up kilometers because we don't have interoperability of systems. We continue to use colonial systems. To trade amongst ourselves as Africans, we continue to use colonial systems. So we are saying, and with the leadership of the Assembly of Heads of States and Government of the African continent, that actually introduce a single system for customs and interoperability. It is not the job of heads of states to solve that problem, it's my job. They've set out the vision. My job is to make sure that those goods in Kasumbalesa, between Zambia and DRC, that they transit in a flow, that they transit in a seamless way. So, honorable members, the challenge that we have is immense. But I believe fundamentally we can do it. I believe we can do it. But we have to rely on you as the Parliament, as the African people's representatives, to make sure that what the World Bank projects, closing the gender salary gap by 11% by the year 2035, that that particular objective becomes a reality. And young Africans stop being buried deep in the oceans of the Mediterranean. It is a matter of deep regret that as a continent, for the last 65 years, we have been in this condition. It is also a matter of satisfaction that we are well poised to be globally competitive in manufacturing, in investment, in industry, in innovation. 2019, we imported $16 billion worth of pharmaceuticals. But all of those, if I can call them components, came from here. All of those components that power the global pharmaceutical industry come from here. So we import $16 billion worth of pharmaceutical industry products when actually we have the raw materials, if I can call them, here. But what we have been lacking in the last 65 years is integration, the economic integration of our continent. This is why the Honorable President and I have been discussing about what can we do working together. The Parliament, the people's representatives, and the agencies of the African Union to make sure that we deliver for our people. So let me conclude, if I may, with the words of Comrade President Isidore Sankara. President Sankara said, we must dare to invent the future. We must dare to invent the future. This is what President Sankara said almost 30 years ago, if not more. So it is within us as Africans to dare to invent our own future. I think we have a very unique opportunity to work together, you as the people's representatives, to make sure that the domestication of the African continental free trade area happens at local level.